Hey, everybody, and welcome to a conversation with Mike Oppenheim. Did I say that right?
You did.
Okay. Usually you go by Mike Oppy, and so you make it easier on everybody um, to not have to have the last part, which is the more confusing part. I think everybody can do op,
Yeah.
but it's the Inheim part that is difficult. Now, were you inundated with information during the whole Barbie Oppenheimer thing?
So when I was a little kid, I grew up in California in the Bay Area, which is
Uh-huh.
like famously in Berkeley, there's signs that say like nuclear free zone and stuff. And
Right.
like the idiot I was as a little kid, saw that this guy who's associated with the atomic bomb had my name. I mean, I willfully ignored the ER at the end, which is not at
Right,
all
right.
my name. And so I told everyone at school as like a little kid that I was related to him, and the teacher was like horrified and mean, and I didn't understand it. And then like they
Mm,
didn't like call my parents in. It wasn't this dramatic, but as a kid, it felt dramatic. And they basically sorted things out, and I was told you're not related to the guy. And then I was told you also might not want to be related to the guy. He was associated with communism and disgrace. So,
right.
and then
Yeah.
the rest of my life up until the movie release was a lot of people saying, "Oh, Oppenheimer, are you related?" Like, and I'd say, "No, no, no, it's there's no ER at the end." So I would be like correcting them, but then I did some research on him, and he's a really great guy. He actually did like some great things, and the movie tries to
Mm,
capture that. But he was,
right. Yeah.
yeah, he was kind of pinned for something he wasn't really doing. So,
Well,
um,
it's funny because I was just being silly, but I thought maybe
yeah,
you
yeah,
probably did. But it's amazing that people forget the last part of the name.
yeah,
There, like I guess what would you say? Oppenheim would be the name, and then Oppenheimer would be of Oppenheim,
yeah.
perhaps.
I think so. Yeah, something like
Yeah.
that. Oppenheim's a town in Germany. I know that
Yeah.
because I've seen it. Yeah,
So that's interesting. But I figured just because of the first part that people would probably ask you a bunch of questions, even though that's not really your name. But it's funny that you had a story about how you thought, oh yeah, I'll be Oppenheimer. Sure, what the heck, right? It's cool.
yeah.
He made the
Well, as a kid,
bomb,
you
right?
yeah, yeah, big bomb. I mean, it's just like what, and it's now 2025. We teach history very differently. This is like in the 1980s. Like we were
Right.
still
Yeah.
in a Cold War with Russia, so we were pretty braggadocious about.
Right. Well, yeah, and
Yeah.
then and so yeah, in the 80s exactly. So we did you have to go through the nuclear drills? Do you
Yep.
remember these at all? Yeah, me
Yep.
too.
Let's
Oh my
get them
gosh.
to.
It sounds so ridiculous when you're a kid, you just kind of go along with everything. Yeah, I'll get under my desk when the nuclear bomb goes off. Now you're like, what's the point? It's
Yeah.
idiotic, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I think the whole idea behind that was just to make everybody feel better, maybe, even though what everybody was being asked to do was really quite ridiculous.
Yeah, and I liken it in a completely opposite way to I have been told, I have young children, so they have not yet been taught this, but they do active shooter drills in schools now, which is
Yes. Oh gosh, yes.
and to me, I'm liking it because I'm saying it's actually the polar opposite to me. You're introducing a concept to children. Hey, other kids have done this and will do this. And then B,
Hmm.
it's just like, I don't know. I don't like it. I would rather not have a drill. I would rather not talk about it. And I would rather just,
Right.
if and when it happens. But,
Yeah. That's the weird thing. So the funny, if you, I'm not studying on these kind of things, but
me
I
neither.
would
Yeah.
say lightly taking in the information is there have been uh, school shootings forever. It's just now it seems to be well now because we have more people. There's more of them, and I think it's
Mm-hmm.
a bit of a statistical thing, right? So because there's more people, then you have more of this other behavior and so forth. But as far and so active shooter drills is something that my kids had to go through, and yeah, I wasn't all happy about it either. But you're right; it's probably better to be somewhat prepared and I guess that's probably the logic from the nuclear drills either is to try to be to at least you're addressing an issue, even if your solution isn't always the best solution. Because the reality with the active shooter, not to be a downer, but is bullets go through walls.
Yeah.
So I mean, our schools aren't built of Kevlar And just because you barricade the door doesn't mean that something's not going to get into that room. It's just less likely to be as deliberate, possibly.
Hmm.
So yeah, but yeah, we don't want to tell the kids about that stuff. Hopefully, there's no kids are listening to this about my
Yeah.
talk about
Well,
that.
what's funny, my introduction to school shootings was actually in '91. The phenomenally popular song "Jeremy" by Pearl Jam, and the video
Oh
on
yeah,
MTV,
yeah.
and tells the story of a kid who goes to school and he speaks in
Uh-huh.
class today, and it's a reference to him shooting, I think, one or two classmates, and it's a very gory, bloody video, and I don't even think there's a chance in heck that it could be released nowadays. It probably would never pass, you know.
Right nowadays, that we would probably wouldn't. Although there's not many music videos anymore, which is kind of sad. I was just
Yeah.
thinking about that. I just was. I had seen something. Oh, actually, I was on my Fire TV. I was watching something, and then one of the ads was, check out the latest music videos. So I clicked on it, and it did play music videos, but it just kind of made me a little bit sad because you talk about the 80s. Back in the 80s with MTV and everything, we had music videos, and it was the content, it wasn't the background, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And then, like that, like you mentioned, the Jeremy song, that was something that was very powerful at the time because it had everybody's attention, because it wasn't you just put it on and cleaned your house, and you had these things going on. You actually were sitting there paying attention, and the videos got more and more complex after they got going. What was it, 83 was MTV, I'm thinking.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, and so the first videos were very quite simple, and then by the time you get to the 90s, I mean, they're storytelling, right? There's a lot of stuff going on, and it got really complicated and more interesting and so forth. And now I think we're back, because the one that I watched was a K-pop thing,
Mm.
APT, I think is the name of the song. Anyway, it's very simple. It's just people dancing around on a soundstage singing the song, and it had some graphics and things, but it was more like the original. It was more like flock of seagulls
Uh-huh.
standing around
I'm still
playing their
thinking of
synthesizers.
yeah, the Bengals walk like an Egyptian just because I was like a
Yeah.
little boy and I was like, oh, these are like the most beautiful women in the history of the world. Like I remember, like, and this is prepubescent, so it's like very innocent, you know. It's just like these,
Right.
and then also like as a kid in the '80s, thinking adults wear like headbands and like long dangling, just like all the style choices were like fascinating.
Yeah,
Uh,
a little bit out there, right?
I do,
When we look back.
yeah, I like that you brought it up just because I do feel like this sadness about the attention span in our culture, and it's not like that I care about an individual's attention span, but I really am sad that like television shows are made for people holding a phone in their hand and barely watching it. Like
Hmm.
movies are come out at home and people are like walking and leaving. It's just like because like yeah, like art is like consumed with your full attention. It has a profound effect on you, and I've been testing it. I've been
Right.
watching like, old Daniel Day Lewis movies, and I've been putting my phone away, and it's like actually hard. I'm 43, and it's hard for me, and I didn't grow up with these like that. And I have to
Right.
like put it away, and every once in a while, in the first 10, 20 minutes, I'll look at my phone with like this sense of like, well, this movie is not so exciting that I could like not turn and look at something, but I know if I do that, I'm going to lose something, and so yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I know I sound like
Well,
old man on the hill, but yeah.
it is weird like that though, because you're looking for, you get these blips of entertainment rather than getting like a full thing, and we're turning a corner here, Mike. I don't know if you realize, but I'm sure you do, that AI is going to change the way that we look at things, because it's not the same collaborative thing. So I look at, so if we want to elevate ourselves a little bit here, Mike, and
Mhm.
say what we're doing here is a bit of art, right? So we're having a conversation, and it's cached in the podcast light and so forth. And you and I are talking, and so we're interacting, and we're having this free flowing. None of this was planned, and we're bringing the best of ourselves to this moment. Whereas AI, you just go, I want to see a picture of a crab crawling across the beach that gets ate by a shark. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's no collaboration. There's no, and then the work, the heavy lifting all gets done by the computer.
Hmm.
I think it's going to, right now it's not, there's a lot of interesting things, and they're only interesting because they've never been done before.
Hmm.
And I hope as we move forward that it's going to become more of a collaborative process than just, one person throwing out random, thoughts.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I mean, and then that gets taken in. I mean, I'll sit there and I mean, everybody. There's a group, and I can't remember the name of them right now, that is doing all of these movie trailers for really, really popular movies in different styles. So I watched one, Star Wars, if it was made in the 50s, right?
That's cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
and I mean it's on and on. You name a really popular franchise, they've probably done something, and it really is interesting, and it's all AI generated and so forth, and so but it's like, you know, is that, now we're getting into these weird esoteric corners, right? Is that art, or is that
Mm.
just, is that more of, before, in my mind, I would go, oh, I wonder what Star Wars would look like in the 50s. And then in my mind, it would all happen.
Hmm.
Right. But
Yeah.
I can't bring that forward, at that point in time. You could not bring that idea forward easily.
Hmm.
And now you can. And so, I mean, where are we at? What's your thoughts on all this?
I have so many thoughts, and it actually segues into like the most awkward feeling I have as of late, which is like, as is below my name here on this visual podcast. I have a
Mm-hmm.
website, and on that website, I write things. I do podcasts. I do original music and music videos. And my point is that I'm an artist of like all trades. I do like almost every form of art, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
also trying to make money. But I also see my competition and what they're doing to both make money or to like promote, and it turns me off, all of it, to the point where I'm turned off about my own. And then it just makes me, every time I want to quit, like I literally just want to pull the rug and just say, forget it. I don't. And the reason I don't is because Franz Kafka wrote and then thought his friend was going to burn his work, and he didn't. And it made a difference. And so I just know that I'm a human with a real heart who wants to make a difference. And so I do all this art. I also live in this hyper peak capitalism era of America, where
Yeah.
I'm watching the foundation shake at the very least, if not maybe come down. And it's I'm not terrified so much as I am questioning myself and other artists to really think about, like, don't have an issue with charging money for things. No artist should feel like it's not okay to ask money for art, but to expect a society to have reverence for this many people who want to be artists
Mm-hmm.
is actually absurd, including myself. And so it's humbling and a little bit humiliating for me to like do all this math, because when I was started my first band in like the year 1999, 2000, it was such a different landscape. The competition was clear. It was like everyone and their mother wants to play guitar and be in a band, but very few people actually get their S together, practice enough to do it. Like it wasn't,
Mm-hmm.
so like just the sheer level of like, hey, me and my four friends actually practice every single day of the week, have all these songs memorized, we can play them without making mistakes, and they're original, was like enough to get into like venues. And we were like
Mm-hmm.
touring and not making money, but again, it was like a respect driven thing. And now I cringe and feel bad for like all musicians, because no one wants to go to a live event anyway, so you might as well just throw it up on the internet.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. COVID, like, ruined a lot of things. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
and I don't understand. I don't want to get off the AI topic, but just a real
Yeah.
quick aside on the COVID thing. I don't understand how that happened, to be honest with you, because, as when I was young, the whole idea was to go do things, go
Yeah.
places, go, experience stuff, right? And you'd meet up with your friends, even if you didn't have an agenda, didn't have a plan, you'd meet up and you'd go, what do you want to do? And then you'd go do something, right? And nowadays it seems like that's not happening as much. And I think COVID did it. I mean, COVID somehow switch something in a lot of people's brains to to say, I'm just going to be here. And I think that combined with your phone and all that kind of stuff kind of traps people a little bit in that thinking. But to go back to the AI thing, the interesting thing that you mentioned, and something that I hadn't really processed, severely until you mentioned that, was, I'm like, well, why don't you just said, why do my things for this reason? I'm thinking, well, why the heck am I doing my thing? That's a good
Mm-hmm.
question.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think I'm like, I think I do it for my own self enjoyment. That's the number one thing on my list. So if I make money, don't make money, I don't really care. I do all the things that I do solely to fulfill what I feel like doing. That's my goal. But the other thing, and this is what your answer sparked in my head, was for me is, and it's something that actually goes back even further, but the fact that you mentioned it brought it back forward in my head again, was that I do it somewhat for my children, in the sense that I want them to know that you can do things that you
Oh, wow.
enjoy, and it doesn't matter if it's popular, or if it's makes a bunch of money, or any of that, as long as you enjoy doing it. And so, I've always, for years, I will go golfing. I'm not a golfer, but I will go
Uh-huh.
golfing, especially with friends, because it's a social thing. And I have gotten no better at golfing my whole life, but I still will go every once in a while, especially if people are like, "Hey, let's go golfing." I'll be like, "Yeah, let's go golfing." I go, "Just know that I suck and I'm not going to get any better." But I do still enjoy doing it, and I think it's a combination of the two things. I obviously enjoy being with the folks that I'm with, but I still enjoy the sport enough, even though I am incredibly. I mean, it's probably a pain to play with me, especially if you're any good. But I do still enjoy doing it, and I think that's kind of like the art thing. It's a situation where it's like, you just need to, do the things that you want to do, no matter what the outcome.
Hmm.
I think it's a good lesson, and I think that kids who um, get in the rut of thinking that it has to be popular or successful. And then they stop doing it because, even though they like it, but they're like, well, it's not popular or successful, I got to do something that's that. I mean, I don't think that's a good message,
No,
maybe.
and it actually, it affected me on and off in my 20s and 30s, because when I would seek professional guidance for help for how to get to the next level I wanted to get to, I would be
Hmm.
told, your problem, I was told this by everyone every year of my life, you do too many things, pick one and only do that. And then that goes
Hmm.
back to what you just said, which is, that sounds like the worst life ever. Like, I
Right.
do not want to, I have no envy for, this is a random name I'm going to pull, but like Ariana Grande, who gets paid to
Right.
like show up to the same place and sing the same songs every night. And then she can
Oh
only
God. Yeah.
release an album that like the entire group around her that makes money off of her like deems worthy of releasing. Like Taylor Swift,
Right.
I don't listen to her, but I admire her greatly at this point for just doing what she wants. From what I hear, she released like an album that a lot of fans like hated and didn't like, and she was like, "Well, I don't care. This is like how
Right.
my career is going." That's like,
Yeah.
watching people younger than you change in their 30s and 40s is a wonderful, funny feeling. Like it's
Hmm.
cool. Yeah, like Madonna's not my contemporary, so it was weird watching her as someone younger than her. But now I'm talking about Taylor Swift, who's younger than me by the same difference. Madonna's older
Oh,
than me, so
right. Yeah.
I have these like two people showing me two very, and Britney Spears would be from my age group, I guess, except she didn't
Hmm.
really last. Well, she's out. I don't know. So you made me think a lot, but I do agree, especially with having kids, that I'm definitely going to even push that further now, like that you said it with my own life, which is I'm having a great time more than ever making things.
Hmm.
And part of it is I've stopped like religiously posting on social media and going back to social media and looking to see if it like hooked. Like I just have stopped paying attention to the outcome. And it
Hmm.
really is like Buddhism says, just no attachment to outcomes is absolutely a peaceful, better way to go through life as an artist, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it's hard to be, all these metrics are thrown in your face. And then, the funny thing to me is that if so you get all these things thrown in your face, all these stats. Look at all your stats. Look at your stats. How many hits? How many downloads? How many whatevers? And you're like totally focused on that. But if you peel back the curtain a little bit, right? And this is something that was shown to me. I didn't seek this out so much, but something that was shown to me by somebody else. And if you're like, okay, well, we're doing a podcast, so what does it take to be, in the um, top, podcast or something like that, right? And it's funny because there's so many and so forth that, I mean, to be in the top 50%, you only have to have 100 downloads.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But
that's
I never
incredible.
looked into that because you always are focused on what's thrown in your face, right?
Yeah.
And then you hear about the things like, Rogan got 1 million downloads and all this kind of stuff. But the realities are few and far between, right? So
Hmm.
out of
Hmm.
all of them, in order to even, be in the top half, it doesn't take much. But no one knows that, right? And no one
Hmm.
is talking about that necessarily. They're all talking about the most popular things. And so whenever you're focused on that, you always feel like you're not doing enough.
Yeah.
And but the realities are that, well, the reality is it doesn't matter as long as you're happy doing it. But the other reality is that you don't have any idea what the strata is, right? What's the
Hmm.
division? And if you happen upon it, then you realize, well, wait a minute, this is all a bunch of this is all a bunch of smoke and mirrors.
Yeah.
And I think that I mean, I think that happens a lot in other areas. You mentioned that you were in a band and so forth, and I mean, the fact that you even got a gig, you're probably, better than 80% of everybody else out there because you actually got a gig, right?
Yeah.
Or you even mentioned that, getting your poop in a group so you could get it together to
Yeah.
do a song is something. Again, it shoots you to the top. I think we get deluded into thinking we're not good because we're only hear about the people who are at the top of their game,
Yeah.
and the media feeds us that constantly,
Yeah.
and your streams and all that kind of stuff. It's weird. It is a weird. There's no, what do you want to call it? There's no context
Uh-huh. Yeah.
given,
Yeah. Yeah. There's,
and I
and
yeah. Go ahead.
I feel like very strongly too that now more than ever, uh, there's no context for like anything. Like there's a
No.
lot of I keep hearing from vague sources I don't know that everything is going wrong, and then I keep hearing from people I do know that just over and over again, I'm confused. What is going on? What am I supposed to care about? What can I do? And it's just like this state of bamboozlement, which to me is not just like political and not just American. It's like all over
Right.
the world, and it has to do
Mm.
with AI. There's this reset of like it used to be pretty simple. Like, where's my first and second and third meal going to come from? And if I can't figure
Mm.
those three things out, nothing else matters. And then I think like there's so much free time in what we call first world countries, and I would even argue
Mm.
second world countries. Um, and there's something going on with AI because it's like people who hate work are scared to lose the work they hate to AI. And I think the
Right.
reason people are scared is they don't trust that we have our S together as people to just
Mm.
actually harmoniously use AI and also give food out to people and like make it peaceful. Like I think that they burned food in the Great Depression to keep prices high.
Mm.
That's a lesson I certainly never forgot, even though I wasn't alive in the Great Depression. I will never forget reading Grapes of Wrath and learning what I
Mm.
learned in my teens about how ruthless and mean um,
Right.
that was. And so I do think like when there's a coming scarcity of like, and again, scarcity of labor only because AI is going to take white collar jobs and robots with AI are going to take blue collar jobs. So it's like,
Mm.
you know, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's yeah. And I'm not terrified. I'm actually just more, I'm a little sad. Like I'm using the same word over and over again. I'm just like a little sad that I see it coming and I really just, it's the singularity, all this stuff. It's just coming and it just is.
Yeah. Well, and I think this would be my thought because I'm sad as well because we have, the changes seem to be happening quicker, right? So
Yeah, yeah,
I had a somewhat similar um experience as my parents, right? There was
hmm
changes, but the computers and everything over time there through the 80s and the 90s and so forth, but that they didn't have. But and it was drastic, but it wasn't so drastic that it shifted the world as quickly, right?
yeah,
So,
totally.
but here lately, I mean, here just if you think about 2000, right? We're only in 2025, so over the last 25 years, it's the shifts have been felt tremendous,
Yeah,
right? Um, and so I feel bad for kids growing up because they're feeling these shifts within shorter periods of life. So between the time you think a kid was born in 2000 and then it's now 2025, how different the world is for them. That for me, I didn't notice it until I was probably in my, a bit later, you know what I mean,
yeah,
probably 30 or something.
yeah, yeah.
And
I'm with you.
and so, it's interesting how quickly everything's happening and the fact that we are still um, we have generations of people who aren't dealing with that who have a certain amount of power. And I don't want to get too much into politics, but because I'm not really a political person,
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
so they're not dealing with these changes well at all, and
Yeah,
and
yeah,
so because they're not used to them, and so I think that causes a lot of friction and a
hmm
lot of confusion and in some ways a lot of uh, animosity. They want to hold on to
yeah,
their time
yeah,
period, and they do things within their power to do so, which then ruin the progress. So it's a little
yeah,
bit of both, right? It's a little
yeah,
bit on both ends of the spectrum with the way it's going. Because to me, we are at a time in history where literally I think at least in the area that I live, right? I'm not going to blanket the world with this statement, but in the area I live, you could easily feed everybody. You could
hmm
easily put somebody in a living situation, right, and give them clothes and so forth, and you can easily educate everybody,
hmm
and yet we don't.
Bob, this is like where, like my heart, like we talk about collaborations in humans. This is it. This is like it's so hard to know that so many of us feel this and know this, and yet we really are powerless. Like I don't, I hate when I hear accusations that we should or we could do more. Like it's really not true. It would be abrasive and rude to just start demanding my way and just start like yelling at people, but
Hmm.
it's we have the capability. And again, what you said, like where you live is true, but where you live is a model that could be spread out easily with AI and everything else that's going on.
Yeah,
And they've invented solar planes. Like we don't even need to have gasoline to like fly
right.
ship and supplies. I mean, it's even like a nuclear reactor on like our warships are a beacon of environmentalism. So
Right.
the machinations of war are like, yeah. Oh,
It's wild though if you think about it. I would say, and it's been a few years. I mean, it's not just happened now. I mean, this has been over
yeah.
the last few years at least that we have all of the tools, we have all of the knowledge, and we have all of the pieces, but we don't implement them. And if you can imagine, you know, taking this next step, it you it would be easy, I think. Maybe it's not easy is not the word to use, but it would be possible to do a lot of these things, and I keep reading that we're the only industrialized country without some type of healthcare system in place for everybody, and it makes me sad because that's another area that could ease, we could adapt, right?
Hmm.
And I think the problem becomes, you talk about burning food and the depression, is because we don't want to change. You know, the buggy whip people don't want buggies to go away.
Yeah.
And but there comes a time when that has to happen.
Hmm.
And if we, the longer we wait and don't make it happen, and then it's eventually just going to burst free.
Hmm.
And it'll be harder to do that than it will be to do a controlled transition if we do an uncontrolled transition.
Hmm.
And it, just like anything, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, you could take that idea and drag it all the way down to, how am I going to get this kid to the car because he doesn't want to go somewhere?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great. I mean, yeah.
I can grab him and throw him in the car, or we can take a little time and work on our strategy to make going someplace to be enjoyable, as opposed to being traumatic.
Yeah.
And I think, and I'll tell you, I'll be honest with you, because I get a lot of guff because I use a lot of examples with, even in work and so forth, with children, because and they're like, we're not children, because they're thinking about the children part. I'm thinking about the process part. So, because everybody's not going to get along and everybody's not going to do exactly what you want, but, and just like children. And so then if you do a process that, and this, goes for little kids all the way up to adults, because we don't really change that much. I mean, let's be
No.
honest. Then you do the process, and it makes everybody have a more enjoyable experience. But as soon as I mention children, then everybody thinks I'm calling them children, and then they get mad at
Yep.
me. But that's not the point of it. The point is to say, you know, there's processes that we can adapt to make things happen, and not get everybody upset.
Yeah.
Uh,
And
so, you know,
I would also add that when you treat adults like children, they behave like children. So either way, it's gonna be a problem because if people keep taunting the poor are going to uprise. It happened in France, it happened in Russia, it happened in Cuba, it happens anytime, anywhere when people are not educated well and angry. And I
right.
just think it's a disgraceful mistake to be this pedantic with most of society as the way leadership. And when I say this, this is why you and I are similar about politics. I am not
Yeah.
talking about one party. I am talking about the
Right.
collective feeling of people versus power, like this antagonistic
Hmm.
relationship that has clearly it preceded my life. It was in the Vietnam War era with Nixon. It comes in waves and goes, but the point is the wave is clearly coming, and there is a way to like calm, and unite. And it's just it's
Right.
and again, I am not a I'm not a Chicken Little. I don't think a society is going to fully collapse and we're going to all kill each other. What I do think is going to happen is it's just going to be like sad, like a prolonged sad like loss of identity and concern for your neighbors and community.
Hmm.
Intimacy is such an awkward word because people associate it only with like sex and love,
Hmm.
but intimacy is also what you and I are trying to do, which is like let down our guards and share our opinions and thoughts. And I feel no judgment from you, and I know I'm not judging you, but I am listening to you and thinking and reflecting. I'm not just talking at you and trying to get you to agree with me.
Right. Yelling at me, you gotta go with me. You
Yeah.
gotta go with my
Yeah.
side.
Yeah. And
This is
so
the best way. Yeah, no, exactly. And yeah, everybody always talks about, every time something negative happens, everybody, oh, society's going to collapse. Society's going to collapse. Believe me, there's too many people with too much at stake to let society collapse. I mean,
yeah.
there, in order to get to that point, I think there'd have to be a huge amount of destruction, like a
Yeah.
war or some type of cataclysm, and then you're going to get there.
Yeah.
Us amongst ourselves is never going to let it collapse, because there's, everybody has got too much skin in the game to let it all fall apart. Now, if there's a giant tsunami that wipes out half of the United States or something, then yeah, I'll probably feel that way. But I think that's the only thing that's, if we get asteroids hitting us or something, that's the only
Yeah.
thing that's gonna really make a difference in that equation. Yeah, but I think kind of, let's loop back to our art conversation a little bit with AI and so forth. I think that there's always a pendulum. Everything that happens typically has the arc of a pendulum. So it starts, it's nowhere to be seen, and it comes into view, and then it's too much, and then it works its way back, and eventually it evens out. And I think that's what's going to happen with AI. Yes, there are going to be some changes, and yes, they're going to be difficult changes for a while. But I think overall, eventually, it's going to even out into where, in 10 years or something, 20 years, you're going to looking back and think, oh, why was everybody all worried about this? It's made my life so much better.
Yeah, yeah. That's something that people are so quick to dismiss is like, I would love more free time, and I would love an assistant to do a lot of the mundane. Before we came on, I was typing furiously. That was stuff my AI assistant would easily be doing for me. It was like
Right.
corresponding, not like in a heartfelt way. Like I wasn't writing an old friend with a catch-up letter. I was literally just, dotting some I's and crossing T's and stuff. And like, so yeah, and people keep, you have kids, I have kids. People are really naive of talking about how easily children are duped. I think it's the opposite. I don't think kids are going to be duped by AI. I think they're going to grow with it. Yeah, I don't know. I am not pessimistic or down on AI. I am pessimistic and down on the intersection of peak capitalism and early AI. So like just this, like you said, just a little period.
Hmm.
And I'm down on it because I'm an artist and I like going outside. I like touching grass. I like, so that's all.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because if you think about it, right, and I don't know if you're like Star Trek or I think Star Trek is a little bit more of a better example for our societal than Star Wars
Me
necessarily.
too. Yeah, absolutely.
So Star Trek, they had all these cool things. You could talk to computer. You could tell the computer to do some, computations for you that you can't do in your head, and all this kind of stuff. And everybody loved it, right? And then the fact that basically society in that futuristic show had turned a corner, and it turned a corner to be, where everything is provided for us, right? There's no talk of wages in
Mm-hmm.
Star Trek.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Captain
That's
Kirk
cool.
never said, "Gosh, I wish I'd get a raise." Um, right? Everybody,
Yeah, that's
they
cool.
basically they didn't work for money. They worked for to do more. So if you wanted to be a captain, you had to put in the time, which you have to do now. But there's
Mm-hmm.
this component of money that's part of the equation, right? There's no component of money, right? Because you're all taken care of. You're all fed. You got the replicator. You can have whatever you want, and so forth. And then there's no the only time money came into Star Trek was in Deep Space Nine, I think, with the Latinum, with the alien race, the Ferengi. They were the only ones, and that's the first time I can remember money being in the Star Trek universe. Otherwise, you always just tried to do your best, and you wanted to attain another rank, which means you did better than somebody else in this skill set. And so it was all about achievement through personal doing the work, doing the personal building yourself as a person, as opposed to I got to make a couple more bucks. So yeah, it to me that is fascinating to look back on it. Yet we like that. Yet we have something going on that is kind of pushing us in a direction like that, and we're like, oh, wait a minute. I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk to the computer and have it talk to me. Uh, you know,
Well,
uh,
I think
weird.
um, the only pushback in my head to our side of this, because I am with you completely. And I remember as a kid, I really actually remember Star Trek blowing my mind because it actually had like Asians and black people and like I'm
Sure.
talking about the '60s one, and like
Yeah,
that was like
diversity.
mind blowing to me as a kid because there was no other program with that. I mean, we had the Cosby Show, but that was a new show, so this was like,
Right.
and I remember like to boldly go, and I remember the movie version, like actually thinking about it, like and be like, oh wow, the premise of this show is peace. Like it was just like mind blowing as I was because I was growing up, like we said, in the Cold War. But the
Hmm.
other thing, the other pushback in my life, as and it's from the same era, is the famous haunting end scene of 2001: A Space Odyssey, where the
Right.
people have lied to Dave about why he's on the mission. So that's the
Hmm.
first thing that reminds me of current society. We would do that. We
Right.
would totally lie to
Sure.
people,
Oh,
and
totally lie to people. Yeah.
and then he's horrified when he finds out that he doesn't know where he's going or have any control, and then Hal is in control, and then it's just this like pivotal scene where you can see why we should have AI regulating pipes and water and nuclear reaction stuff, but there also should always be a human who's actually above it, and
Right.
that's the missing link that I think a lot of people who are smart are worried about is
Well,
oversight.
here my thing, and everybody, even with technology, current technology that's not sentient or have any intelligence at all, I'm like, you can pull the plug.
Yeah, yeah,
They're
exactly.
dependent on you to feed them energy, and somewhere, where that energy comes from. So you can hit the breaker, you can, pull the plug, you can cut a wire. I mean, everybody seems to forget that. You know what I mean? It's like, you know,
Well, there's Boston Dynamics is working really hard to put a monkey wrench in that, which is they want to have these like lithium battery
oh, sure.
packs on like
Yeah.
robot soldier. So the problem is it's always the machinations of war. It's always the like,
Right.
they're building do you watch Black Mirror before I go off on a
Yeah. No, I haven't seen all of it, but yeah, I have seen parts of it.
you
Yeah.
seen the robot dog one by chance? It's where
Mm,
these people like stumble on a factory that's been shut down, and it's like after a cataclysmic war, and they don't
mm,
know it, but there's all these like basically picture Boston Dynamics like
mm,
robot dogs and stuff that are like terrifyingly good at like finding humans and killing them, and
mm.
because of battery technology they can't pull a plug, and so the whole
Right.
premise of the show, and again, I'm not, you know me well enough to know I am not saying you're wrong at all. What I am saying is the only thing that does scare me is Boston Dynamics and the Pentagon working together behind all our backs, and just,
Sure.
you know, yeah,
Yeah. But I mean, if you had the means, I mean, there's nothing greater than a bullet going through a lithium battery to ruin your day. I don't know if you've ever experienced one
no,
catching fire, but they have little thin layers of material to keep it from combusting. And
oh
that's why you
wow,
see all these videos where phones go up in flames and so forth, is
yeah,
because all that gets compromised. And so, yeah, there's the funny thing is you would think, and this another one of these weird tangents here, but it's humans keep surviving even though we're very fragile,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah,
So, but all these other things that are created are just as fragile. It's just we build them up a little bit in our minds to think that they're invincible, which maybe, I mean, in ways they can be invincible, right? And they don't sleep and they don't need to eat and they don't need to drink anything like we do. And so that makes them a little bit more adept at doing certain things, just like the reason, AI can compute way faster than we can. And that's what makes it fascinating and amazing, right? But the reality is, there's always an Achilles heel on everything, and the great thing about humans is we're incredibly adaptable, and for whatever reason, we've been fantastic at finding those weaknesses because we
mm-hmm.
find them in each other constantly, and we find them in everything around us, right? We
Yeah,
exploit all the weaknesses. The reason we have a society that we do today is we've exploited every weakness that we could in nature and everything around us, right?
mm-hmm.
And so, I don't see why that wouldn't continue
Mm-hmm.
to do so. And one of the robot dogs could be waterproof to a point, but hey, maybe he
Mm-hmm.
can't swim in water for a half an hour like you can, and then there's the end of that, right?
Yeah,
So all of it, it's all really fascinating to think about in that way. Is I've always kind of gets back to a thing that I always tell my kids, you always feel like I'm getting stuck in a position or I'm stuck in doing something or I feel stuck in this. And I'm like, you always have a choice. Every time, no matter what the situation, no matter what you're doing, remember you always have a choice. And that choice is to leave.
Hmm.
That choice
Hmm.
is to stop, right? Yes, there's going to be consequences, right?
Hmm.
But that is always your choice. You don't have to stay there if you are willing to accept the consequences of the choice to leave. And the other thing was, and it's weird the kids that don't that always think about this because it's a lot of rules in place for everybody. And at one point in time, there's discussions at school and so forth about, if there's a fire in your house, what will you do and everything. And I told, my kids, I'm like, if there's a fire in the house, you throw whatever you want through that window and get out of here.
Hmm.
They're like,
Hmm.
I can break the window? Yeah. If there's a
Yeah.
fire in the house, because they're going, go to these exits and everything. I'm like, I go, whenever there's certain situations where rules apply to nothing.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
and so you just have to make the decision. Am I in a situation where the rules don't apply? And you do whatever you need to do to get yourself out of that situation. And it was almost to me, when I told them, it was like in their eyes, they're like, oh my gosh, I can break a window.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, only if you're in the
Yeah.
situation. But before that, it was like a realization, and they're like, before they would have never in a million years thought to break the window
Yeah.
because you're not supposed to break windows. And I'm like, no, just break the window. Why would you wait?
You're such a good dad because it's such a preoccupation and somewhat of a fear of mine that people can be too obeyant. Like they can't
Yeah.
understand what exactly you're talking about. And it reminds me of so when Gene Hackman passed away, I decided to watch a couple of my favorite movies of his as kind of like a
Hmm.
tribute. I just really liked him as an actor. So I rewatched
Yeah.
The Unforgiven, and I didn't realize that movie, like the premise is Clint Eastwood tells his two little kids, "Hey, I'm leaving for like God knows how long. If something goes wrong, go down 3 miles down the road and find that woman you kind of know, and
Right.
she'll help you." And then he just leaves, and it's like this daughter and this son, and they're like so young, and it's on the frontier, and like I was just like laughing because I was like, God, we are like, you can't even like leave your kid in a car anymore. Like when I was a kid, my
Right.
parents would leave me in a car for like an hour and a half at a freaking shopping mall, like
Right.
just in like a parking lot in the sun, and like they're like it was electric windows, you couldn't even get the window like more than the crack they'd leave it, and it was just like, so it's just funny because I think that's an absurd thing to do to children, is to take away any of their like discovery, and and like my friend's kid almost died in a creek the other day with all his friends because
Oh
he was an
no.
idiot. It was like the
Right.
creek was frozen over, and the kids like
Oh, they
9
went
or 10
walking
or
on.
11.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they all thought, and one of them fell, and
Yeah.
the only reason that he didn't die is because the kids weren't actually cowards, and they actually understood like we need to get down and help him out. But
Hmm.
I know like a lot of kids who would be like, oh, I'm gonna get in trouble. Like I shouldn't
Hmm.
report, or like we should just run and like leave this person, or the old drop your friend off at the hospital versus what if the
Right.
police find out and we're gonna get in trouble. No, take your friend to the hospital. Like I don't care if
That's
he did
right.
ketamine and heroin and any other drugs. Like just like and that's so all this is related to me. This idea of like break in an emergency. That's
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, we have polite society, and then we have emergencies, and emergencies are different. And you need I think the problem is that, to me at least, is that people don't you're using the rules over your own brain, and
yeah,
you're going to know what is you need to do, and then you just have to make the decision, yes, it's serious enough for me to do it. And you don't think about the rules, don't think about anything. If you're wrong, you're wrong. Who cares? As long as survive to the next thing, that's the important part, right?
yeah,
And that it just, to me, I think there's so much um rule enforcement, perhaps, that makes people fear, that it's overkill. And we just need to say, you need to know the difference, and know the difference. And at a certain point in your life, you uh you just know, right?
yeah,
You've get enough exposure to know. And like, if somebody falls in, that you need to do what you need to do to get them out. If there's more than one, want somebody run for help while we try to help. And
yeah,
that way you've got, it's problem solving skills, right?
yeah, yeah,
That's what
totally.
it is. It's as simple as that. And unfortunately, I think we this gets into education now. We do too much to push the, you know, the normal answers, and not enough to
Mhm.
say, okay, you know, something chaotic just happened. What do you do?
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of that kind of learning going on. It's a little bit more, you know, fact learning as opposed to situational learning. And I think, and I always talk about abstract learning, right? You have to
Hmm.
have a lot of abstract learning, and some people are so concrete that they don't get the abstract part where you have to really think beyond. So, you know, you talk about that situation on the creek. You know, if you have more than one person runs for adults, another
Hmm.
person helps. You know that maybe the ice is thin, so maybe you get a branch. You put the
Hmm.
branch out there first because you know if I go out on the ice, I'm going to fall in. I mean, but we don't get these situational, you know, abstract thinking skills as much as I think we used to,
Hmm.
perhaps,
Yeah.
because it's the environment has been made so safe that you never have to do that.
Yeah.
Um,
And there's also like heuristical models and use of heuristics. Like AI is becoming a heuristic in itself, and a heuristic for anyone
mhm.
listening, just because it's a sounds more fancy than it is just
Right.
simply like the multiplication table. Like just memorizing 8 times 8 is 64. It was different than saying 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8 is 64.
Mhm.
So heuristics are convenient because they save us time. But in the example of like the fire, the rule is you're never allowed to leave the house because you're under 4 and you're not allowed to open the
Right.
front door. Well, in a fire, it's the complete opposite. All those rules are off. Like obviously,
Right.
so and AI to me, my fear of AI as a my fear. Okay, like my friend who designs chips for AMD once told me I can't design a chip. He said all I can do is run this complicated program that I spent relentless years in college as an engineer learning that
Mhm.
then tells the machine how to make the chip. And meanwhile, the blueprint for the chip was made by someone else who doesn't know how to do what I do. And so he's explaining that like the supply chain of making chips for everything we use is there's almost no one on earth who knows how to actually do it all, like who could take
Mhm.
silicone and create a chip and then blah blah blah. But back in the 50s and the 60s, especially in Silicon Valley, people were making their own computers. They were experimenting with
Right.
fusing things and like so and people used to, repair a whole radio. Like you could go. So I'm worried about AI as a heuristic for everything, like not even
Mhm.
knowing how to like brush your teeth because AI moves the toothbrush in the right
That's
direction.
right.
What I mean? Like, so, but
Yeah,
worried is might be the wrong word. Yeah.
that's interesting because yeah, that's one of those things, and people. Um, I'm trying to think. There was a movie. I'm blanking on that, but anyway, you know, well, how could like there was something the sci-fi movie where they had faster than light technology, but they didn't know how to do simple tasks, and they're like, how did that happen? It's like it's easy how it happens because eventually the average person gets so removed from the technology, like these phones, right? We talked about phones earlier. I can't make a phone, right? I used to, as you know, kind of a hobby kind of thing. I could work on your regular old Bell telephone. Uh,
Yeah.
I could take it apart and put it back together. This kind of phone, I can't do that, right? And
Yeah.
eventually, we get the average. It gets to be more and more of an elite skill to the point where if all of those people with that elite skill were wiped out, you would have no idea how to make that phone.
Yep.
And we have so many things like that, right? Everybody talks about, you know, cars are getting so complicated that you know you can't fix them yourself.
Yep.
Now you're pushing that into an elite skill, right?
Yeah.
And so everything can happen like that. And then if something were to come about that would were to wipe out all those folks with that knowledge, then how would you, you know, get that? Where would that knowledge come from? It had to be reinvented at
Well,
that point.
they say some people that is what the Library of Alexandria did is that it set back humanity by like
Right.
hundreds of years, and they say people predict that there's been many examples of that where like a
Yeah.
society has just crushed information. Yeah, it's interesting. I think about this a lot, especially as a kid. I used to take everything apart. My parents would get so annoyed. I would like take a phone, unscrew it, and I remember like
Yeah.
and I made like an intercom once, and I was like,
Yeah.
I probably it's the most proud I've ever been of myself. Probably that like that. And I remember it took like 4 weeks. Like I kept experimenting and like taking things apart and like trying different things. And yeah, so it's the not being able to fix a car, the fact that like also they this ties into like mechanics want to make money, and so do car companies. So like I drive a Hyundai with like a fancy computer. Most of
Hmm.
the like mom and pop shops I actually want to use cannot help me with my car when a certain thing goes
Right.
wrong. And it's
Hmm.
very frustrating because the Hyundai place, because of COVID, had wait times of 3.5 months. And so I
Right.
was in this rock hard place situation that was so frustrating during COVID where I couldn't actually get a basic thing done on my car. Um, and it just made me think about where we're headed. Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean that, and that's a negative to it all, right? So,
Mhm.
yeah, and I mean, and that gets into feeds back into the capitalism thing that you mentioned earlier and so forth. How it all kind of ties together because they obviously want to keep their, corner that market, right? So
Mhm.
they don't want to just give it all away. But at some point, I think we have to think beyond all that. We have to think
Yeah.
about, how do we sustain ourselves beyond this ideology, right? This
Mhm.
this concept, because it's eventually going to go. I mean, if we continue on our trajectory, all this is going to change, and all of it's going to go away,
Yeah.
and so we're going to be on something else. Because really, if you think about it, and this is one of those, you know, one of those things. We're really only about 150 years into this model.
Mhm.
150 years ago, yes, there was money. There's always been money way back in the Roman times and everything, but it's not been like this.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? And people aren't doing things the same way. And so the modern age, which started with the kind of the industrial revolution of things, is not that old.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, it's
No, I
not.
agree. Yeah.
Yeah, and it changed from an agrarian kind of thing to what it is now. I mean, the big buildings and everything, and you still see the buildings from the 20s, which was when buildings got bigger, right? It was
Mhm.
around the 1910, 1920, and so forth, and that was helped along because of the economic factors of those times that didn't have that before then. And so, yeah, I mean, and so we're working our way into the next thing, and and we have to be, ready to do that. But
And we
let's,
didn't even, oh,
oh, go
sorry.
ahead, go
We
ahead.
didn't even brush on the other final part of all this conversation, which is there's a declining rate of relationships, there's a declining rate of birth, and there's a declining rate of sex, especially among young people, which is mind blowing to this not young person. And in addition to all
Yeah.
that, they are now developing chatbots that agree with you when you want it to, disagree when you don't want it to, and then you can turn that on and off. And then on top of
Hmm.
that, Japan has invented synthetic skin and
Hmm.
robotics that are the real thing. So what do you think is coming? What's going to coming is
Right.
why on earth would you put up with, I mean, my wife would admit this and I would admit this. Like if I was a lot younger, I don't know if I would want to be in a real marriage the way you and I have experienced it, the way most
Right.
people have, because that adversity is challenging and hard. I don't think relationships are hard. I'm not saying anything condemning about it. What I am saying is, if you had the option of a beautiful, never aging robot that complements your personality exactly how you want, and then when you're bored of that, you can change its personality, I'm actually worried for young people. I don't think they have
Yeah.
the understanding of like the palpable human expression of love and how different that is from sex with a robot, you know?
Yeah, that's weird. But by the joke in our house is that if either one of us were to pass away or something, my wife or myself, the other one would be like, "Are we going to get remarried?" Or no, that's it. This is it.
Yeah, yeah,
We're done.
totally.
We're good to stay together for this period and so forth, but we're not going to venture into new territory. This is it.
That's the
Uh,
same thing with my wife's like I would never cheat on my wife because that's such a hassle. Like
it's exactly right. Well, what's the point? Yeah,
there's no point, and it was just like no, I
exactly.
don't. Yeah,
Yeah,
courting my
I'm
wife
like,
was long and arduous, and I loved her and I loved doing it. But oh my god, I don't want to like. I'm out.
yeah, exactly. I'm like, yeah, I'd be fine. I mean, I'd be sad, but I'd be
Yeah,
fine.
yeah, yeah,
Well, thanks, Mike. I know you got other stuff to get on to
yeah.
today. I want
No,
to
thanks.
thank you very much for taking the time. And I've got your website on the board here. Anything else you want to give as parting thoughts?
Yeah, I would just say to anyone listening, young or old or same age as us, don't give up, no matter what it is that you're about to give up on. I don't care what it is. Just don't give up.
Mhm.
Give it another day, because I do think hope springs eternal. And there's just so much negativity and dismissiveness, and what's popular is fighting and arguing and negativity. But you know what you like. You like camaraderie and good spirit and good times. So just try to not give up on other people and yourself and whatever it is that's bothering you.
There you go. Words to live by. Thanks, Mike. And
Yeah, thank
till
you.
till the next time we meet again. All right. And
Awesome.
hold on for just a second.